In the heart of a Nazi-occupied France, and in the darkest corners of war, when the world seemed lost to the horrors of brutality and oppression, there were whispers. Whispers of defiance, whispers of rebellion. Among those whispers, one name echoed louder than the rest: Nancy Grace Augusta Wake. She was known as the White Mouse, a woman they could never catch. But her story is more than a white mouse escaping from its cage. It's one of courage, sacrifice, and an indomitable will to fight against oppression. Welcome to Historical Digs, where we dig out the secrets from the annals of history. Early life. Nancy Wake, a prominent figure in the French resistance during the Second World War, was born on the 30th of August 1912 in Wellington, New Zealand. Nancy's childhood was wrought with poverty and instability. As a little girl, she dreamed of adventure far beyond the shores of Australia. At the sweet age of 16, she ran away from home and began working as a nurse in other parts of Australia. She later moved to Europe. She traveled to France and London and soon found work as a journalist. She married a rich industrialist named Henry Fiocca in 1937 and eventually settled down in France. In Europe, working as a journalist, Wake was unfortunate enough to witness the rise of the Nazis. It was in 1933 in Vienna that she saw the brutality of fascism firsthand. Wake began to recognize the threat of fascist ideology as she started witnessing the Jewish people being brutally harassed in the streets by Nazi gangs. After seeing these original displays of brutality against Jewish individuals, Wake stated that, "My hatred of the Nazis was very, very deep. Nazi gang violence against innocent Jews was enough to convince Nancy to work tirelessly and do everything that she could to halt the Nazi Gestapo." Nancy's hatred for fascism would define the course of her life, drawing her deeper into the coming storm of war. The Road to War. In her autobiography, The White Mouse, she recalled one pivotal memory involving her watching SS officers beat Jewish civilians in the streets of Vienna. This moment clarified her sense of duty. There is no question that she witnessed the rise of Adolf Hitler and the rise of the Nazi movement, but her moral compass was set. She was determined to oppose the Nazi regime, no matter the cost. In 1939, as the Nazi jackboots marched across Europe, Nancy and her husband's comfortable life in Marseille came to a grinding halt. Nancy felt an urgent need to act. Despite the dangers, she joined the French resistance. After the Franco-German armistice in 1940, which divided France, she worked for the escape line of Captain Ian Garrow. She transformed into a vital cog in the Pat O'Leary escape network, orchestrated and led by Belgian commander Albert Guéris and British officer Ian Garrow. Nancy, being an intelligent woman, used her charm and beauty to move inconspicuously through checkpoints, smuggling information, and aiding Allied servicemen and Jewish refugees from France into neutral Spain. The Gestapo's most wanted, the White Mouse. As her involvement with the French resistance deepened, so did the danger she faced. The Gestapo was constantly monitoring her activities. Her life was in constant danger, with the Gestapo tapping her phone and intercepting her mail. Wake was the Gestapo's most wanted spy. According to various historical sources, Wake's ability to evade capture, even under the most challenging circumstances, led the Gestapo to call her the White Mouse and placed a bounty of 5 million francs for her head in 1943. With the Gestapo closing in on Nancy, she knew that if she stayed, she would eventually be caught. So, Nancy made a difficult decision to flee Marseille, cross the Pyrenees to Spain, and finally ended up in Britain. After she left, her husband was to follow her to Britain, but Henry Fiocca was captured, tortured, and interrogated by the Gestapo to give insights into Nancy's whereabouts, to which her husband remained silent and was later executed, a fact that Nancy was unaware of until the end of the war. Recruitment into the SOE. Driven by passion for justice and a close escape from France, Nancy was recruited for the Special Operations Executive, or SOE, in 1943, a British intelligence agency tasked with conducting operations in occupied Europe. She underwent rigorous training, learning the skills of espionage, sabotage, and unarmed combat. She learned a variety of critical spying skills, from handling explosives to mastering Morse code for radio communication. She became an expert at unarmed combat, infiltration tactics, and wilderness survival. She joined the French section of the Special Operations Executive, determined to become a spy, persuading experienced agents to train her in guerrilla warfare, a combat strategy used by small, covert groups. Nancy, at 31, received intensive instruction in combat, explosives, and radio communications. Return to France. In April 1944, just months before the D-Day invasion, Nancy parachuted back into occupied France as an SOE agent. She worked alongside the Maquis, local guerrilla fighters, organizing sabotage operations and leading attacks against German forces. Nancy Wake was instrumental in leading over 7,000 Maquis fighters in guerrilla warfare against the Nazis. She coordinated parachute supply drops, took part in the sabotage of German-occupied sites, and kept in radio contact with the Special Operations Executive. And guess what? Nancy even rode a bicycle for around 500 kilometers in a span of 72 hours in order to arrange new codes when the radio codes were lost. By the end of September 1944, the war had effectively ended for Nancy and her Maquis fighters. The White Mouse was highly respected by the 18 groups of Maquisards she commanded. The end of war and recognition. By the time the war ended, Nancy Wake had become one of the most decorated women of the Allied forces. Nancy's contributions to the war effort and her fearless resolve, as noted by historians, earned her numerous awards after the war, making her one of the most decorated female spies in World War II history. She was awarded the George Medal from the United Kingdom, the Medal of Freedom from the United States, and both the Knight and Officer ranks of the Légion d'honneur, along with the Croix de Guerre 3 times, and the Médaille de la Résistance from France. In her home country of Australia, she received the Companion of the Order of Australia, and New Zealand honored her with a badge in gold. Post-war life. After the war, Wake worked as a clerk for the British in France before returning to Australia in 1948. From 1949 to 1951, she ran as a Liberal Party candidate in the Australian elections, though she was unsuccessful. In 1951, she left Australia for Britain, where she again ran for Parliament in 1966, but once more did not succeed. In 2001, she once again left Australia for England, where she lived out her remaining years. In 2004, she accepted and finally became a Companion of the Order of Australia. Later, she lived in the Star and Garter home for ex-servicemen and women in Richmond, Surrey. Afterlife. Nancy Wake passed away on August 7, 2011, in a London hospital at the age of 98, having lived a life filled with courage, resilience, and an unwavering belief in freedom. Honoring her final wish, her ashes were scattered over the hills of Auvergne, where she had fought alongside the Maquis during the war. As she put it in her words, "When I die, I want my ashes scattered over the hills where I fought alongside all those men." In the deadliest conflict of the 20th century, Nancy Grace Augusta Wake was a master of disguise, a fearless fighter, a smuggler of secrets across enemy lines, and a brilliant war strategist. She became well known in stories of resistance against the Nazi regime, remembered by many as a symbol of defiance and resilience. Nancy Wake's legacy as the White Mouse is long-lived. She defied the Gestapo, evaded capture, and became a legend of the French resistance. Nancy was a famously blunt raconteur who led an intrepid life in the French resistance. Her story stands as a testament of bravery in the face of persecution. As with all history, we leave it to you to interpret her legacy and its impact on the world. Let's wrap up this video with her most famous quote: "Freedom is the only thing worth living for." Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you admire the heroic life of Nancy Grace Augusta Wake and her quest for justice, then don't forget to subscribe and come back for more history digs.